Good to me. In 2003, the most dangerous thing you could do here was drive down the road, and it was difficult for me at first to switch gears because the nature of the IEDs has changed. So driving down the road isn't the dangerous thing that it once was. I was here with the U.S. Army. I was a team leader on a bomb disposal team. I primarily worked in Mosul. When I started out in the infantry, it was a good place for me to be at the time when I was young. And that's when I learned. I didn't realize that bomb disposal was a job. And once I found out about it, then when it was time for me to re-enlist, I crossed over to do EOD. Combat engineers are tasked with minefield clearance, and EOD in the U.S. military are tasked with IED, render safe, and disposal. So there's similar skill sets, but the EOD work gets a lot more technical and a lot more nuanced, I guess you could say. And the nature of IEDs is they're not predictable and they're not consistent. You need a different set of skills to successfully address an area with mines in place than a area with IEDs in place. Where the IED work tends to be more problem solving or a decision tree as you're working, and depending on what you find, you're going to adjust your methodology or your techniques, whether it's on that particular device or all the devices in the area that you're working in. One of the locations we did was a petrol station, and Dave, our other IED operator here, did 30 or 50 IEDs in just 40 or 50 meters of road. Just absolutely mind-boggling quantity of IEDs in a very small location. So it's unlike anything I have ever seen before. These have been sitting in the ground for a very long time, so that means there's been several rainy seasons since most of these have been in place. And as the earth gets wet and then dries out and gets wet and dries out, it gets very compacted and very difficult to dig in. So the kind of thing you would normally do in hard earth to dig, you can't do in the presence of IED. So it just creates a lot of challenges, and that's really where the special skills and the special training comes in. You have to know how the devices work and how they might work. You can't just act as if all of the IEDs are the same, because they're not. They're rarely the same. So it's just an extremely conservative, meticulous, often very slow approach to identifying the components in the IED without giving them the opportunity to function. One of the things that's nice about this environment where there aren't active bad guys is that we have the luxury of being slow and methodical. Imagine a bunch of household or normal things that are repurposed to make a switch to fire an IED. So anything innocuous from like a piece of rubber tubing, a hose pipe, a plastic syringe, a water bottle, all of these things are repurposed and remanufactured, if you will, have bits added to them to make them into switches, essentially, that function these devices. If I'm doing a minefield clearance operation, I know that it's got two fuse wells on the bottom that might have an anti-tamper function on it, but it's a certain device that screws into the bottom. I know how it works. I know where it is. So I'm not having to search for it. I'm just having to verify the presence or absence of it. And because it's a manufactured component, I know it does certain things. It works in a certain way. I can do certain things to render it safe. It's very ritualistic, I guess. You cannot operate on an IED in a ritualized manner. It's just not safe to do that. So mentally, you always have to be assuming that there's more to it than what you can see. I always tell people it's not the stuff that I see that worries me. It's the stuff that I don't see, literally and figuratively. I have to be anticipating this one is going to be different than the last one, because honestly, it probably is. The threat to me will change on every IED because the way they've placed it has changed. The device is manufactured in a way that if I remove a component, it will make the device function. If I move the main charge, you only have to lift it about 4 millimeters of movement to make the device function. Maybe 5 at most. But the anti-lift device is kind of the Easter egg you're looking for. So it may be underneath the main charge, it may be underneath the pressure plate, it may be buried next to the device with a stone placed on top of it. When I'm doing my work, if I find the stone before I find the pressure release switch, it creates a different set of issues for me, because a stone is a fairly innocuous item. So when I find that stone, if I think of it as just another stone in the ground and I remove it, the device will kill me. So every stone, everything that I find is an IED component until I can positively establish that it's not an IED component. Our day will start anywhere between usually 0400, 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. When it's hot out, we try to knock out our work day as early as we can, arrive on the scene as the sun's coming up so we can get started as soon as possible. It's pretty brutal here in the summer, both the temperature and flies and bugs and stuff like that. So getting out of Baghdad presents some challenges. There tends to be issues getting through the checkpoints. There's certain paperwork that we have to have in the vehicles for the weapons, for the people in the vehicles, and occasionally when we go through the vehicles, they want to go through all the paperwork and make sure all the boxes have been ticked. Eventually, we wind up at the location. The first thing that happens is we have to, every day we check the area to make sure that no IEDs have been placed in our absence, if it's a place we've been working at for multiple days. After we check our initial area, we set up our ICP and do our safety briefing and our mission briefing for that day. From there, generally the search teams will go out and start doing their thing. On a bigger task, we're clearing a large area. There's a lot of marking and recording progress with the GPS. So our GIS guys can make sure it's plotted on the map and everything's accurate. At some point during the day, inevitably, they'll find an IED. And at that point, the search team will stop working, and I will go down and render safe the IED. So we either run out of time or run out of real estate that needs coverage, and pack it up and then begin the adventure of trying to make it home. And just like on the way out in the morning, sometimes getting back is a big part of the challenge. And at times have spent hours at checkpoints waiting for permission to pass. So you never know. There's nothing that's ever routine with our day. There's patches in the asphalt just as we cross the bridge, driving on the far side of the river. And every one of those was a command detonated IED, and there were probably at least 10 or 15 of them along this kilometer-long section after we crossed the bridge. And our teams got those devices out. We dug them up. We rendered them safe. And I know that all those people using those bridges and doing their daily activities on that side of town were, directly impacted by those, whether they knew it or not. The truth is, if an IED goes off, it's probably going to be me. Just the odds are with what I'm doing and the nature of my work, it's probably going to be me. And I have no doubt at all that Danny will utilizing the search team and the people to search down to me, that Danny's coming to me as soon as he can. It probably won't be any point, but they won't not do it just because it looks ugly from 40 or 50 meters back or whatever. And you kind of need that, it would be hard to go downrange if you had any question about these guys having your back or them doing the difficult things they needed to do. So it's kind of interesting. Bomb guys tend to be kind of weird. Some of them are a lot weirder than others. But I've noticed with guys who do IED work that they're always like a half stroke off normal in some way, some more than others. And I am pretty socially awkward, like in life in general. So I tend to gravitate towards non-team activities. I don't want to say I'm not a team player, because in this environment you have to be a team player, but individual activity versus group activity, I'm the individual activity kind of guy. So it fits with my personality to do work like this, and it's a comfortable place for me. I have confidence in my ability to do this job, but I completely acknowledge that there's a very real possibility that it could go terribly wrong one day, and this could be the end of my story right here, and I have to accept that to come here and do this work. It's just the reality of the situation. I proved everything to myself that I needed to prove to myself a long time ago. I know what I'll do when things go sideways, because things have gone sideways a couple times before, and I know how I reacted, and everybody else here is the same way, and I've seen these guys when the most horrible things happen. They reel in the emotions, they get to work, they focus on the job, they stay safe, as safe as you can, and do it has to be done. And to me, it's very simple. It's between me and the IED, and my job is to be there when they find it, and then when they find it, make it safe so we can move on. IED work is something that either sounds like the coolest job ever or the worst idea ever, and there's usually not anybody who's like indifferent about it. You really don't want anybody that's like not passionate about it.